Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have a fabulous show for you. We're going to be talking about this book, The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And we have Paul White here with us to step us through the powerful information in this book. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This book was fantastic. I was talking to you earlier how I just went through a full day presentation of which I presented a lot of material. And I asked the attendees at the end, what is the one thing that you got the most out of this presentation? And it was your work. Because I wrote it, the five love languages. Are like, yeah, it's like, thanks. I just knocked myself out. But, whatever, whatever, whatever gets you, whatever insights you get are all good. And so for her, she had read Gary Chapman's original book on the five love languages, and she
Right.
never thought about applying it to work. Do you get that response often where people are like, oh, I never even thought about that?
Not so much that one, but more about, I thought about that, but I wasn't sure how it would work with the love thing. And I'm excited to see that, you've applied to work-based relationships. So it's sort of like it was in the back of their mind, but they weren't sure how to get there.
Yeah, and so what I think is interesting when what I'd like to do during the show is step through what some of these languages are, ask you some questions about applying this to work, because I think it's a little
Sure.
bit like, well, I'm not sure. That question that a lot of people have is what we're going to cover in the very beginning, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about the languages of appreciation in the workplace and what that looks like in the office.
Sure.
So, first, I wanted to talk about what common misconceptions people have about this body. When they think about appreciation, what do companies typically think is appreciation, and what are some misconceptions they
Yeah.
have?
Great, cool starting point because first of all, there's lots of different reactions. Some people are really excited about it. Some people are like, it's interesting. I'd be open. Others are like, hey, nobody ever patted me on the back and I turned out fine, and sort of why should we have to say
Right.
thanks, for people doing their job? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a wide range of reactions. But I think the other part is that probably the biggest misconception, and deal with this in this book, and as well as our other book that just came out on the vibrant workplace, is the difference between appreciation and employee recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started, I'm a psychologist, and when I first started on this, I'm not an HR person, I'm not sort of
Mm-hmm.
a corporate trainer,
Mm-hmm.
and so I didn't know what was up about employee recognition so much. So I started to find out, and my initial reaction was, boy, this is not working well. In fact, I talked to some other trainers, and they
Mm-hmm.
said, I said, it's not working. They said, I know, but we don't know what to do. And what I found out is that, recognition, when it's well developed and implemented, is about performance. And that's what it
Mm.
originally was designed for people to meet their goals or to, incentivize them for sales and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's fine and that's good. The problem in sort of the HR industry is they've taken, because we've been so successful with appreciation and been received so well, that they're now trying to use recognition for appreciation, and that doesn't work because most employee recognition programs are organizational, so it's pretty structured, and it comes from the top down. It's pretty generic. Everybody gets the same thing as
Right.
far as certificate or called up front or gift card or whatever. It feels really impersonal, and because it's really from the HR manager or the management, it's not from a person to a person. And it just doesn't feel authentic about me. And so that's a confusion.
Mm.
We have to help people get through that and understand that appreciation can be about performance, about that, you appreciate and value that somebody did a good job, but it goes beyond that. And one of the
Mm.
things that we really emphasize is it's about the person
Mm.
because, I think you and I both can acknowledge we're people, even at work. We're not
Mm-hmm.
just a production unit,
Mm-hmm.
and we're people outside of work. And sometimes calling attention to and appreciating and value what somebody's doing outside of work can be valuable in building a warm relationship at work as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that sort of recognition, appreciation, confusion it can
Yeah,
create problems.
when you were talking about that, I was thinking about my days back in corporate life, of which I spent 20 plus years of my life in corporations, and the First of all, only the sales guys seem to get any
Right.
kind of bonuses of any sort, and then everything else was divvied up by like team. So it may be like your team shipped, therefore you get a bunch of jackets because your
Right.
team, Excel
Right.
shipped Excel 4.0, and here's your jacket or here's your
There you
plaque.
go.
And then there are salespeople who got to go to Hawaii. I'm like, um, what is
Yeah.
going on? Like, why do they get to Hawaii? Why do I get a jacket? Like, what is happening here?
Yeah,
Um,
and even beyond that, even within, a department, typically it's the top 10 to 15%
right,
that keep getting the same recognition. So you have a big middle group, and we can talk about low performance in a minute, but if you manage those right, it's not an issue. But you've got your big middle group of people that are working hard, showing up, doing the best job. They're maybe not your stars, but in a recognition program, they never hear anything.
right.
And one of the things that we know is that there's some research that showed that 79% of the people who leave work voluntarily, who quit, do so because they don't feel valued or appreciated. Most
Mm,
people don't leave for more money or a promotion. They leave because they feel like nobody gives a rip about what they're doing. And
right.
so when you don't aren't able to communicate appreciation authentically to everybody, then you put them at risk for leaving, and that's a tough way to run an
Hmm.
organization.
I was coaching a millennial, and she said, I feel like I could just not show up or die at any moment, and no one would know that I was missing.
Yeah,
And I thought, wow, that's really bad. But that's a form. That's like the most extreme, right? I don't.
absolutely.
I don't matter. I could die, and it wouldn't matter because no one even knows that I'm here. They don't even recognize the stuff that I have done. So what the heck? Like, why am I even here? And guess what? She's thinking of leaving her job. They've
Yeah.
invested about five. She's been at her job 5 to 7 years, so she has
Wow.
a wealth of information. She's been there for a while. She has all the requisites. It's in the high tech industry, which is
Sure.
so hard to employ people
Right.
with technical experience. So I'm sure her company does not want her to go because it's very expensive and very hard to replace her. Yet she just wants to leave because she just feels like I'm like a potted plant here. No one knows that I even exist or even recognizes my presence. You know,
Right.
I had someone who said, I sometimes have to say to my boss, hi. And I'm hoping sometimes she doesn't say hi back, and I've had to explain to her like, I need you to say hi back so I know that I'm alive. I'm even
Perfect.
in this organization, so it can get extremely bad.
It's crazy. I mean, one study showed that 65% of the people said they hadn't received any recognition or appreciation, hadn't heard anything positive in a year.
Wow.
And to me, that's just crazy. And no wonder people get discouraged and all that. So,
Yeah.
and in fact, when I do trainings with leaders and groups, one of the main reasons people say that they don't feel appreciated is that they don't hear anything positive. Now, what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is they hear things, but it's usually critiques or instructions of how to do things better. And so I had one guy who was an accountant. He said, "Yeah, as long as I'm doing my job, it's fine, but the silence is deafening." And he said, "Once I make a mistake or I'm a little late, they're all over me."
Right.
And he left within 3 months of telling me
Wow.
that. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
problem.
It's awful. Well, I think that The o- here's the thing that I've noticed is that there are performance reviews, and companies are getting more adept at instead of like waiting a year to tell you how
Right.
you're doing. People are doing, they're either incorporating in one-on-ones or they do these quick mid 6 month reviews, and some companies even more frequently than that. So that helps, but I think the thing that's missing is that it goes back to your original comment that they're focusing on performance only, right? So,
Right.
how are you doing? What have you done for me lately? And are you
Exactly.
doing the thing that you're doing for me lately correctly and
Right.
rightly based on my lens? So, and, based on the actual results that you've created. And so, if you think about the full dimensionality of who we are, yes, what I'm doing and how I'm achieving your business goals is one aspect of me. But if
Right.
I'm being kind, which is who I'm being, and
Hmm.
what I'm doing to other people, like maybe I'm helping other people or I'm actually helping other people get their work done, whatever, those things aren't necessarily recognized. And so, is that what you mean by appreciation versus like recognition
Well, that's
versus.
part of it. I mean, for sure. I mean, part of the deal is that there are characteristics. Again, if we get back to sort of high performers versus everybody else, there are things that we value in people and in coworkers that aren't necessarily related to performance. Okay, so for example, I like to work with cheerful people rather than grumpy people.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and so that doesn't necessarily make them a better
Right.
performer,
Right.
but they're more fun to be around, right?
Right.
Or flip side, people that aren't grumbling and complaining all the time. Sometimes it's not what they do, but it's what they're not doing.
Right.
Um,
I
and
love that
so
you don't whine and you're pleasant. Is that what you're saying
I
to
mean, it's like,
people?
or somebody who doesn't sort of ramp up a meeting or a situation that's already emotional. Some people can just keep it
Right.
going
They're
and
accelerants to chaos.
whip it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And other people that are sort of calm and say, well, let's stop and think about this. It's not going to show up on their performance review, but that's a kind of team member you like to have. And so one of the things I've learned, I've been doing this, I don't know, just 9 or 10 years with this specific part, but at first people would say, well, what do you do if you don't appreciate somebody?
Mm-hmm.
And because there's people that are more difficult to appreciate, and worked on it for a while. And you can sort of, well, one thing, you don't want to blow through it. You don't want to try to fake it and act like you
Right.
do when you don't, because that doesn't go well.
Yeah.
But appreciation really comes from a sense of value. I mean, if you
Mm.
think of really the word of, things that we appreciate or property that appreciates, it
Mm-hmm.
increases in value.
Mm.
So if you have a hard time with somebody that you're not sure you appreciate, think about what they do that you value. And most of the time, if you're working with somebody, they're doing something potentially for you that if they didn't do it, your life would be tougher,
Right.
right? So it doesn't have to be, shoot the moon kind of stuff. It's just like, hey, thanks for showing up regularly, answering the phones, and sort of running interference for me. Now, it can also then, the value can be outside of work. And,
Mm.
and that sometimes you have to go to
Mm.
somebody who's really not doing well at work and say, I know you're training for a half marathon, and I just think that's cool that you got the self-discipline to do that.
Right.
And it doesn't have to do with work, but it builds a relational connection. They have a sense that you have gotten to know them a little bit and value them. Or let's say a single mom who's doing a really good job of raising her kids, and you say, man, I'm just super impressed with how committed you are to your kids and going to their things and doing work as well. And again, it's about the person, not only just getting stuff done.
Okay, so I want to take those two examples, and so let's take an example of the gentleman. Let's say a guy who's training for a half marathon, who's training so much that he's showing up late to meetings, missing meetings, or not performing. Right. So here you have, so you talked about the low, mid, and high performers, and typically with the
Right.
high performers, they're taken care of. Right. There's some people know enough, hopefully they're taken care of, but it's
Right.
the people in the middle, and then what to do with the low performer. So the middle is probably easier to come up with some of the strategies you talk about. Like, I appreciate that you show up on time, or appreciate that you're the calm presence in the meeting. But what about the person who is training for his half marathon to the point that it's affecting his job?
Right.
And you actually are having a hard time appreciating him right now because he's, messing up right and left.
Yep.
What does one do?
You have to distinguish it. I mean, because work is about work. I mean, I'm a psychologist, and this is relational stuff. People say, "Oh, you just want us to have a group hug and everybody happy."
Right.
That's not the goal. The goal is work is about providing goods or services that people want and need and are willing to pay for. And so we have a task, we have a mission, we want to accomplish that, and it tends to go better when you work together with people and can keep them motivated and engaged and so forth. So at some point, if somebody's not performing well, you call them out on it, and it's like, I think it's cool you're training, but man, you're showing up late and it's impacting the rest of the team, and you got to be real specific about it, right? I mean, so on both sides, the more specific, the better. And you say, I like this, but it can't interfere with getting stuff done. And this is part of my task and what you've got to do. So you just got to make a difference.
Okay, so to me that just sounds like how the format now when you have reviews is that I'm going to tell you something positive, and then I'm like waiting for the boom to hit me.
The old sandwich approach, yeah. And part of the issue that we deal with in our training, and we have an online train the trainer course for coaches and that kind of stuff to take people through, is authenticity, right? And it's like, because if you're questioning their motives, are they just trying to manipulate me?
Right.
or what are they trying to get out of me, or they're setting me up for whatever. That's a relational issue. That's a trust issue
Mm.
that needs to be dealt with. In fact, I was dealing with a call center of a major telecom place, and they brought me to deal with appreciation, and there was such lack of trust and lack of respect and anger. I'm like, hey, time out. This is good, the appreciation stuff, but we got to deal with the trust issues first, because
Uh,
if you don't believe what I have to say, it doesn't matter whether it's appreciation or something else. So you've got to
uh,
sometimes back up and deal with those issues.
I see. So if you're like using the appreciation band-aid, hoping it will cover like a gigantic, severed wound, this is not going to solve the problem. You need to
You got it.
fix it. Okay, got it. Do you find
Yeah.
that people are trying to do that? Take like severed wounds and just like there's something fundamentally broken, and they're like, let's work on appreciation. Maybe that's going to be the
There
thing.
are some, there's some, and it doesn't go well for them. I mean, and because people know it, and so, and in fact, I mean, when I talk to groups, I say, look, there's some of you that are really excited about this, some that are okay and interested, some that sort of want to watch and see how it goes, and others that aren't interested at all. I said, that's fine. You are who you are. I'm not going to change you. But those of you that aren't interested, just step to the side and let us do our thing. Don't try to act like it, because then that undermines the perceived authenticity for everybody. So
Oh,
you got to work with where people are.
yeah.
And that's the other thing. I mean, when we go into an organization or even a part of an organization, we don't do a top-down implementation like, okay, everybody's doing this. Because I mean, I worked with hospitals where people had to write, 3 thank you notes every month or whatever. Well, if you're getting a third note on the last day of the month, you sort of know where you rank for that
Right.
person, right? And everybody's having to do it, and so it's like, everybody has to do it.
Yeah,
So
do it in an
we
authentic way.
yeah,
Yeah.
we try to expose people to what we're doing and then let them opt in. And one of the things that we found is that if we do a pilot group within an organization, we did this with Miller Coors and we've done it with Compassion International, um, and people sort of watch and see that we're focusing on being authentic and the real deal, and then it just sort of goes viral from there. And the people that don't want to be, they aren't, and that's fine.
Okay, I have
They
so
also
many.
have the highest turnover
I have
in
so many
their
questions. I don't even know where to start. Okay, so I have like 30 questions that started from there. But what I would like to do is talk about the love languages, and then we'll circle back to some of these other questions because I have so many. There are just like 400 questions that popped up in my head as a
Well,
result of that.
another time we'll follow up. That's fine.
Okay, so I want to talk about the love languages, specifically what there are, or love languages of appreciation, and
Right.
what they are and how they apply in the work context. So there are 5.
Right.
And just for folks out there, they're quality, positive affirmation, quality time, acts of service, gifts, and touch. And so those are the 5 languages of appreciation. And so,
And they're also the 5 love languages. That's where they were derived.
right,
And it's a great book for personal relationships. It sold, I don't know, 11 million copies the last I heard. And so we took those concepts of the sort of communicating in different ways and figured out, okay, can this, first of all, the question is, can it be applied to work? And we found that it can be, and felt like the equivalent in a work relationship is appreciation rather than love, obviously.
right. And so this is, I'm going to one of the listeners who said, how are we going to change things? And so this is one approach to changing things. And then, what if you don't notice value to being grateful? I'm just going in. What if you don't notice a value to be grateful? Okay, I think we've already talked about that. Like you're not feeling it. And what I heard
Yeah.
you say is be authentic. Because if
Wait.
you're not
Yeah,
feeling
just
it,
wait.
yeah, step back. Okay, so there are 5 languages of appreciation. And so as a psychologist, I'd like you to I want to get a sense from you, like what is at the root of, I mean, at the root, it seems like everyone wants to matter
You got it.
yeah,
To be valued,
valued.
not only by themselves, by other people. At some level, we've got to, understand and accept the value that we have for ourselves, but we get discouraged, right? I mean,
Right.
we get worn down, and it's like, does anybody else think I have anything to offer? And so, really, appreciation is that it's affirming the value of another person.
Yeah.
And so, if we take the language, we call it words of affirmation. So it's words that affirm, okay? And so we're saying, hey, I really value the fact that you get your reports done in and on time to me, so that I can turn my reports around and get them to my supervisor, okay? And we always talk about sort of three steps. Use a person's name. Stephanie, thanks for getting your reports done, on time, specifics, and then why it's important, either to
Mm,
you, to the organization, or your clientele. So thanks for
I
getting
love
them
that
done,
format. Got
so that
Stephanie.
so that I can then get my stuff done and I'm not feeling pressured.
Right. So why
Uh,
is it important to the company and why is it important to you? So thanks for getting it done, Stephanie. Personal. The format is because it really helps me get my report, impact on me, and the impact on the organization was because it's what did you say?
Well, either it can either be on the organization, the client, or on you. So it can
Okay.
be just one of those, that there's a reason why it's helpful.
Right. Or,
Okay.
it helped that client. I'm sure that helped that client because I know that they were rushing and trying to get that
Correct.
information that you provided. So that's like one package, positive affirmation.
Now, words can be oral, right? I
Right.
mean, spoken, and it can be one-on-one, or it could be in front of a small group, a small team, or it could be in front of a large group. And one of the problems with recognition programs is they do it in front of a big group. And since the beginning, every presentation or training I do, I ask the group, okay, how many of you would really rather not go up in front of a large group to be
Yeah,
recognized? Okay.
me.
30 to 40% easy every time, except for high performing financial advisors. And they're like, where's the TV and the camera? Just bring it on,
Right.
right? So, but then you take subgroups, and like administrative assistants are more like 60 to 70% don't want to go up. Librarians are 90%, right? And so I had one gal said, yeah, I got an award and I went up. And she said, but I spent the 15 to 20 minutes before getting the award in the bathroom throwing up.
Oh, poor
So
thing.
obviously, that wasn't a positive experience. And so one of our core principles is not everybody feels appreciated in the same way.
Right. Right.
And so you have to understand that people are different than you. And so it can be words, it can be most private, it can be written. Um, Large group stuff you got to be careful about because a lot of
Hmm.
people don't like it.
It's funny. So I've told you that I've been using the a very brief version of your book in the presentation I'm doing, and I'm saying, so what kind of appreciation do you like? And for the vast majority of people, and this is a financial firm, so it may be just, so
Right.
they're one probably highly introverted, two very private, they're and very analytical, so they're more on the introverted side, and
Mm-hmm.
for the most of them almost 90% of them said what I really would like is an email to me and my boss saying, hey, I know you really spent, thank you for spending the time last night. I noticed that you were up here really late and I really appreciate it because,
Right. Right.
the client, blah, blah, blah. But it's an email that's CC'd to their boss and like knowing
And
that
that's what
somehow
we
will be
find with,
reflective of
yeah,
you.
with introverts, because I deal with, computer tech people and programmers a lot, and we say you don't have to say it to them because, when you're anxious, you do some nonverbal things that send wrong messages. They think you don't mean it or something because you're not looking at them. So say, yeah, just write them an email. It also gives you control over when you send it. You can review it and look at the wording so you get it right. And so, yeah, lots of times writing is really good.
Yeah, it's
Um,
funny. I wrote our contractor who built our house, built a portion of our house 5 years ago. He did just such a beautiful job, and I said to him, I said, Ben, what you do matters so much because everything, like I've been thinking about legacy, and when you build this deck will be here. It will last longer than I will probably because you've put so much care and attention into it, and it just means so much to me that you put the care and attention to do this, and everything that you do is of utmost quality, and I notice.
cool.
And
Yeah.
so I said this, and like I was looking at his face, and it was as if I was like, there's been a crash, someone has a severed limb, someone's gonna die. His whole
Okay.
face. He's of Swedish descent. His whole face was just like
Yeah.
terrified. And then at the very end, I saw like a smile that was like this, like it was a
Yeah.
micro smile.
Right. Right. Right.
So it was a train wreck. But I thought, oh my God, I guess this is not the way. And this is just one on one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But he
Well,
just
we've dealt with Northern European cultures. I mean, with in Norway and Denmark and Sweden, and it's a countercultural approach. I mean, I had the opportunity to do some training on a big ship, and the captains were from Norway, and one of them said, "This is totally foreign. I never heard anything positive growing up."
right.
From my parents, from school, clearly not from employers. So there's some cross-cultural issues. Let me just say a word about what you said about 90%. we with the book comes a code to take the inventory, online
Right.
inventory called Motivating by Appreciation Inventory, where
Yes.
you get,
Ding.
how
Yeah.
you like to show appreciation.
Yeah.
There we go. And we've had 115,000 people take that. And 45 to 46% of people, words is their first choice of language. So and part of that's an acculturation kind of thing, I think, in the workplace. But still, what's interesting is over 50% of the workforce, it's not words. Okay, so we have to remember, even though words is the most frequently preferred, it's not everybody. And in fact, I
Right.
had one guy say he grew up in a subculture where if people gave a compliment, the next thing that was coming was an ask. Okay, and it's
Okay,
sort of
so
like,
he's nervous. Like,
yeah,
what do you
so
want
he
from
said,
me?
when I hear compliments, like, what do they want from me? And his language was time. And so you could give a compliment, you could write it, say whatever, it didn't matter. It just, he had that wall. So we have to understand that people are different than we are.
So someone may actually, so the other 50, 40, whatever, 53%. So someone may want quality time. Like what percentage of people generally, do you remember what percentage of
Yeah,
people want
it's
quality?
about 20 to 23% that
Okay.
want quality time. Now, what's interesting is one of the core obstacles that we address in the Vibrant Workplace, it's basically a book of the 10 most common obstacles to make a culture of appreciation and how to overcome them. One of them is busyness. I mean, people are busy, right? They don't have time for this. So you look at quality time and say, how's this going to work? Well, a couple of things. One, it doesn't take much time. Usually people just want, 5 minutes, stop by. I had a CFO tell me, she said, all I want is people to stop by, check in, see how I'm doing. And then I'm booting them because I got too much to do myself. But then also, time is not necessarily, if you're a manager or a supervisor, it doesn't mean they want time with you. Because as a manager, you think you're the most important person, right? And so
Oh,
there's
I see. So it
some
could be your
people,
coworker who's like, you want a
it might
dish
be their
like,
coworker that they'd like to go hang out and go out to lunch or go out after work or whatever. So that's where in the inventory, we identify a person's primary language, and then we go and give them a bunch of choices of specific actions and from whom they want those. So it's like, hey, I'd like to hang out and watch sports with my colleagues, okay?
right.
Or I'd like to have some individual time with my boss. So it's really important to understand that it's not always that they want individual time with you, even though you're great and best person in the world.
That's
So
funny because when we were talking about this yesterday, this woman said, I really care about quality time. And that can just be simply like they have a group lunch that they get together, the three of them, and then go to lunch. And that's quality time, a time to, and what I think was interesting how you described it, it's a quality dialogue where a person shares their feelings, thoughts, and desires in an uninterrupted context. And so it's just like, hey, I think it's as simple, and I think we may make this more complicated, but it's just like, how are you doing? What's
yeah,
going on? How are
well,
you
and there's
doing?
also there is um, in the majority culture in the U.S. there's somewhat a gender pattern of most guys hang out together and do things together and they talk while they're doing it,
Right.
as opposed to a lot of women like to get together, sit across from each other and chat and catch up that way. For people that like that individual attention, one of the key things is not to have any distractions going on, because if you're also checking your phone or looking at the computer, it basically disregards the sense of quality time from you,
Right.
because they don't have your focused
Right.
attention.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Have we
there's some
spent enough
different.
quality time now? How are you doing? Tell me
Exactly.
about the death of your mom. That kind of thing. It's not helpful.
And some people just like to do things collaboratively, and this is true for younger workers now. I mean, that used to, sort of your supervisor relationship was the most important. It still is to some degree, but a lot of people, they just don't want to do stuff by themselves. They enjoy doing it as a team together, and so it can be that kind of time as well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about I live in Washington, and there's a ferry system, and when you take the ferry during the summer, it's probably like a 4 or 5 hour wait
Oh
to
well,
get on the ferry. So it was me and these two guys. We all worked together, and it was for fun. But we were waiting, and then the guy's like, "Well, let's throw a ball around." I'm like, "Why?"
right,
And they're like,
yeah,
because we're going to throw a ball around.
right,
And then I watched them throw this ball around, and I started throwing the ball around with them. We were just throwing a football,
yeah,
and they were talking. So they were doing
exactly.
something together, which is throwing a ball around. And it's funny because when I ask my guy friends, how are you doing? They're kind of like, they're shocked. Like, what?
Yeah.
What? Like, what's happening here? Why are you asking me this? But
Yeah.
if I were to just throw a ball with them, I'm sure like, stuff would come out, but it would come out in this kind of way that felt comfortable for them. So I definitely understand this idea of when you're little kids, they call it parallel play. Where you're
Right.
together,
Yep.
you're playing with
Exactly.
each other. You're not really
Yeah.
quite connected, but it's the connection that feels safe for you. All right, so that's quality time, and there are a whole bunch of different ideas in the book. Grabbing coffee, lunch. I like the idea. My husband said that there was a boss that he had, and the only quality time he would get is if he said, Lindsay, do you want to go for coffee? Because he knew every single time he'd ask him, he'd want a coffee because this guy
Yeah.
was addicted to
Oh,
coffee. So
yeah.
that was how he got his quality time. And sometimes it's a matter of asking it. So if your boss doesn't give it to you, you can always ask for it,
Sure.
right? It doesn't
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
be something that,
You
this
have to look
program.
around.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so acts of service. This one I
Yeah.
had tell me what this is for folks who are unfamiliar with it. And then I have a whole bunch of questions related to it.
Okay. So acts of service, it's not rescuing a low performing colleague. Okay.
Okay, that
It's
was my
little,
question.
it's little things that you can do that can help make a person's day go better.
Okay.
Think about this context. This is when it's most appropriate. Is when you're working on a time deadline for a project and you're cranking and you got to get stuff done. What's something that somebody could do that would make that go better for you? Whether that's bringing in, lunch so you can keep working, or maybe answer your calls and sort of so that you can keep focused. Go run this errand for you. Lots of times, for some reason, people's printers seem to be out and about in different parts of the building, and go get stuff that's printed up or whatever.
Right.
And so it's just that kind of thing. I mean, I had a graphic designer who told me, sorry, she was working on a project, and her colleagues were leaving, and they said, "Hey, man, great job, keep it up. Hope you get done. And if you get done, we'll be down to the sports bar and come join us." That was the wrong thing to do.
Right.
She was fuming, right? And for
Like,
some
seriously?
people,
Yeah, that kind of pissed me off. And even if I weren't an active service person,
yeah.
that's just irritating.
Yeah, I mean, and some people words are neutral, but for some people words are actually negative. I mean, they grew up in a context where people didn't tell the truth, and so they don't trust people. And so it's like, words are cheap, don't tell me you care, show me. And so it's really about demonstrating it in an active way. And again, it doesn't have to be a big deal. And sometimes I had one example of an accounting clerk who said, she was behind the eight ball and she had some calls to make, and she was just sitting at her desk at lunchtime, and a colleague walked by and saw her just sort of like deer in the headlights. And she says, "Is there anything you can do or I can do to help out?" And the answer is always no, I'm good, right? I mean,
Right.
culturally, it's sort of, so you sort of have to push through it. And she said, "No, really, because I got, some time at lunch." And she said, "Well, I know my desk is a wreck, and I got these calls. If you could just make some calls to customers, let them know I haven't forgotten about them, and I can focus on this and dig out a little bit." And the gal was telling the story that the next training session, she wasn't especially emotionally demonstrative, but she started to tear up a little bit. She said, "It's nice that somebody just noticed
Oh,
and
yeah.
did a little something." And it took 15 minutes of this other gal's time. And so any of these can be really impactful. And part of our job, the busyness, is we don't want people doing everything for everybody. You don't need to be sending an email to everybody. You don't need to be checking in. You want to find out who needs what and the specific action so you can hit the target really efficiently versus trying to just guess.
Yeah, a couple different things popped up in my head. So my husband, he's been working his job as a writer, and he's also been, so both of us work at home. He's been doing his job as a writer, and we're building a little house in the back of our guest house in the back of our house. And I've looked at him, and sometimes he's just like deer in a headlight, and that exact thing, like, what can I do to help? And if he doesn't say, I just figure out things I can do to help. So if I see like something that he needs, I just do things that he doesn't even know. It's like the silent hand that just
Right.
does things that I know he'll appreciate, even though he may not even notice. But I just do it just to kind of calm things down.
But see, and that works in a personal relationship or a really close relationship, but that's tough in a workplace where
Yeah.
you basically don't. And a number of people say, "I don't want anybody touching my desk. Leave my piles
Right.
alone." And part of it is when you help somebody out, you need to do it their way. In other
Right.
words,
Good point.
It's not like, oh, hey, I know a better way to do this. That's not really encouraging, and they don't want that kind of help. So you got to do it, in the way that's meaningful to them.
Yeah. The other thing that this helps me connect with is that I've been coaching teams on people who are more competitive and more collaborative. And, people just, they snap to. There's probably about 50% that are more competitive, meaning it's all about me. I need to get my stuff done, whatever. And they probably don't. Like if you take their work, they're going to feel like, why are you taking my work? Do you feel like I'm not
Yep.
performing? What are you
Right.
trying to tell me here? And then someone
Right.
who's more collaborative is like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you have my back. I know
Exactly.
that if like it gets really, really bad, that I can ask the team members for my help, and it just feels so good to know that I actually have my back protected and that I could
Yeah.
call on any of you. And that just makes me feel like I'm part of a great team. And so part of that person who said that, their team, the thing that he loves about work is the team and the fact that he knows if just things are disastrously bad, he can send an email, because they all kind of do similar kind of work, send an email that says, I'm drowning, can someone help me make a couple client calls? And that would
Right.
just he knows that someone's going to raise their hand and they're all going to pitch in and make it happen. And
Cool.
so that's a group that that's an interesting example, I think, for that group and what they do for acts of service.
Yeah.
Gifts.
Yeah.
What's
So
what's that all
tangible
about?
gifts. So it's not compensation, it's not bonuses, it's not commissions, it's not
Right.
the whole money thing.
Right.
It's small things that show that you're getting to know the other person at a personal level and what
Mm-hmm.
they like. Okay,
Mm.
so it might be bringing in their favorite Starbucks coffee. My wife likes the orange spice or pumpkin spice one in the fall. And so that, or if you order out pizza, maybe make sure what kind of pizza they like, if they like sort of the
Mm.
vegetarian kind or whatever. um, and it's and actually tangible gifts, the most common tangible gift in the workplace is food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people bring in, whether it's coffee or donuts or, bagels, pizza. I tell people try to be healthier and bring in fruit.
Right.
But I say don't bring in celery and light ranch because that's not
Right.
encouraging to anybody,
Yeah, that's
right?
just like, are you telling us that we all have to lose weight? What are you trying to tell us here?
But after that, it's small things like, let's say somebody's a sports fan and they like the Seahawks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you see a little thing that's got a Seahawks thing, or it's like
Oh.
the magazines. I think the magazines at the grocery store are great because it can be about gardening. They like
Mm.
gardening, or they're training for a race,
I
a
get it.
stretch, and so it's that person part, right? And
Uh,
it really is. I mean, you often hear people say it's not about the money; it's all the thought. This is really true here because it's not like you're going to get a flat screen TV, right? I mean,
right.
it's not a big deal, you know, but it's that, hey, I saw this and I thought you might like it, and so it's like, oh, they're getting to know me and they thought about me. Dr. Chapman, my co-author, had an assistant that liked cashews, and every once in a while he in the grocery store he'd pick up, a can of cashews and bring it in because
Oh,
he
that's
knew that
sweet.
she liked them. So it's
I
small
see.
stuff, but again, it's not a big deal, but it can really warm their heart
Yeah, it's
for
kind of
sure.
like I was thinking of you. It's almost a thought like, oh, you were thinking of me, and it's like, yes, I
Exactly.
was thinking of you, and I got this. So my kids would do this sometimes. They would find rocks, and they're like, here, mom, I got you this rock because they were thinking of me, and I was like, that's sweet. And I'm not a gifts person, so I'd be like, thanks, and they go, but no, I wouldn't do that,
Right.
but still, like, I know at least for my children, I do think about gifts. My mom actually is a gift. That person, that's how she shows love.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're mysterious. I don't, like, she'll get me these things where I'm like, I got you these moccasins. Like, thank you. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm going to do with
Right.
these things, but
Now,
thank
what's
you.
what's interesting about the tangible gifts is that most employee recognition programs are really big on gifts and rewards and that kind of stuff. Our research shows that less than 10%, only right now about 6% of employees choose tangible gifts as their primary way they want to show appreciation.
Wow, that's interesting versus 47% and 22%
Right.
for the other two. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And how about acts of service? And then
And access service is about 20 to 21 in there. Now,
oh,
what's
okay.
interesting is, in researching that and talking to people, it's not that they don't want the stuff and they're going to give it back. It's like, I don't want
Right.
tickets to the theater, but it's more like, if I never hear anything, if you never spend any time with me, if you never help me out when I need help and you give me a gift, and plus it doesn't cost you anything because the company is paying for it, it doesn't feel very meaningful to them.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
um, and so I believe when companies are trying to use rewards and tangible gifts for appreciation, they're wasting a lot of money that
Mm.
that could be used in better ways.
Yeah, for low cost ways, like how much does it cost for you to send an email or say to
Exactly.
someone I appreciated, you
Exactly.
could take like 5 minutes to think about what you value of someone, not that much
Right.
time, right? Or five
Yeah.
minutes,
And
like you said, popping into their office. How you doing?
right. And again, I'm not against recognition for performance when that's the goal, but if you're trying to show that you appreciate them, that's probably you're not
Mm,
getting very close.
okay, I probably should be able to do the math, but what percentage of people appreciate touch?
Well, actually, it's about only about 1 to 2%.
Okay.
And when we first started out, we had the five love languages, and
Mm-hmm.
well, it's just kind of work, physical touch kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, talk to people, and some people say, yeah, I can see it. And other people are like, I don't know. Well, as we first started out, we found out that rarely is physical touch. Now, this is again, I'm going to say for the majority U.S. culture, okay? Because there's some subcultures that it differs. But for the majority U.S. culture, physical touch is rarely anybody's primary language. It's often their lowest. And so we took it out of the inventory because we felt
Mm.
I had a situation where people had been, sexually harassed, and it was
Right,
like,
like don't touch me. I don't like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we took it out, but we leave it in the model because a couple of reasons. One, Dr. Chapman, who studied anthropology, said, I don't want to advocate a touchless society even in the workplace.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because there are times when appropriate touch can be very healing and meaningful, when
Mm.
someone's had a traumatic event or something like that. And also it happens. Now, it depends on the region. I lived in Atlanta for a while, and in the South, they do hugs and side hugs and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But if you think about it, I mean, it's basically spontaneous celebration.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Mm.
What do you do when you make a sale? Congratulatory handshake, or you fix a problem, a high five, or a fist bump. And we actually found that cross culturally, a pat on the back is the most cross culturally accepted physical touch in the workplace. But I had a group of women leaders tell me, she said, but yeah, two pats and no circular motion. So you got you got to sort of differentiate that.
And by the way, no massages. If any of you were thinking about that, I've had a
Right. No
couple
neck
times where
rub.
like coworkers or a boss, I'm like, what the heck is this? And I think I don't know what was going on, but it's just anything that is more
Yeah.
than a kick,
Well,
don't like
and,
it.
and then I work in the Northeast, and physical touch in the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, is just this. It's just like, hey, how you doing? I mean, you just nod the head,
Right.
and that's close enough. So, you know, but we have this our inventory in Chinese and in Spanish and different
Yeah.
languages, and my Hispanic friends said you need to put it back in because for them it's a very
Yeah.
physical culture, and they
Yeah.
hug each other and kiss each other on the cheek, and so it's there. It's not a big deal in most workplaces, but you also don't want to just say, oh, I can't touch it all.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, so we have these five different languages of appreciation, and so I want to go back to the idea of fairness and equity. You had said that some of the, it's like basically, let's say I give you a gift certificate, and
right,
I give you a hug, and I
right,
give you a push.
an email
Yeah.
or
And so,
whatever. Right.
so is there
So
an
here's the
equity
deal with
issue?
so it's a great question. It comes up all the time, but it only comes up at the beginning of somebody that hasn't implemented or haven't worked through it, because when you actually work through it, the issue is I'm trying to show appreciation in a way that's meaningful to you.
Right.
And so if somebody says, I get it, my language is words, and I get an email and there's his gifts, and you bring them, coffee or whatever, I have to just say, cool, I'm glad you told me what is valuable to you, because now I know how to show appreciation to you in a way that's meaningful. I mean, that's the goal. I'm not just want to do
Uh,
inventory kind of thing. And so, hey, if you prefer some time, and people's languages or what they want change over time. If you're around a really sort of verbose person, it's like, I heard it enough, let's help me out with something. And so, as you can just say, hey, that's great. Just let me know, and I'll try to show appreciation in the way that's meaningful to you. And it goes away, because
okay.
lots of times it's again other issues that they feel mistreated or not valued as much as other people. And if you sometimes you have to deal with those issues, but it becomes a non-issue.
Okay, so it could be that this is like a launch corporate wide. It sounds like you were working in these larger groups, or it could be just, let's say
Sometimes.
that I picked up the group, I manage a group of 5 people, and I really want them to be appreciated. So would have to say, hey, I would like to understand what your love, your appreciation is. So then the group knows that there may be 5 different expressions, and that's
Right.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I mean, we've developed some free resources. We have a PowerPoint slide that's
Oh,
a template for groups to be able to plot everybody's language on
oh,
there.
cool.
You actually have a cubicle poster. You can put it up in your cubicle. We got actions that you can do and develop. I grew up professionally in the not-for-profit and social service world. People give a lot, but there's not money for training. And so
Right.
that's why we created this, the Appreciation Work Training Kit, where it's 4 10-minute videos, a facilitator's guide handouts that either a professional HR trainer person or just somebody who's a leader, it's turnkey. You just can take your group through it, and it can be done in a half day. It can be done over a series of 4 or 5 1-hour things. And so it's because one of the other core principles is this is not just for managers and supervisors. We started out that way, but what we found out is that people want to know how to show appreciation to one another
Yeah.
and how to encourage, because if you're
Hmm.
having a bad day, the first person to know about it is your coworker, not your supervisor, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you do that? And so what we found is that by incorporating peers and colleagues as well as supervisors, it really flows, and it
Mm.
takes the weight off of supervisor, like they got to do it.
Right. You're my
And
only sustenance is you. If you don't
yeah,
give me this stuff, I can't take it. Right. So it
yeah,
actually, it's funny because I am also addicted to coffee and tea, and so I'm going to Starbucks all the time, and I'll notice I'm like, hey, that's a new tattoo. How's it? What happened? Is that And so just noticing and acknowledging that something has
yeah,
changed. It matters, right? Because otherwise you're just like a nameless barista off doing
exactly.
stuff, right? So I think it
Yep,
actually makes a difference. So, having said that, I'm going back to some of the misconceptions that people have,
right.
because you had said that how do you do this if you don't like a person or they're disingenuous? I think we've covered like they're not, you know, they're not. So how do you work this if you don't like a person? You're like, I just don't even like you, and now I'm supposed to appreciate you somehow
Yeah,
when I barely even like you.
yeah. So this comes from my world view, and I think probably yours as well, is that people have value intrinsically, that we each have our own value. In some, it's easier to find, and others, it's tougher. Lots of times, the people we don't like, they come from a very different background. We don't understand them. It's like, why do you dress that way? And why do you have your whole body's full of tattoos,
Right.
and or whatever it is.
Right.
And so what I find is that the way to do it is you get to know them a little bit,
Mm.
and you spend some time to say, hey, what'd you do this weekend? And you hear about their kids, or that they went on,
Mm.
a dirt motorboat, cross race, or whatever it might be. And and at some point there's some place to connect, and
Mm.
it may be, I tease sometimes, it's like, hey, I really like your shoes, cool shoes, I mean, it's sort of like, surface level, but you start somewhere, because I don't- you
No,
know
I'm laughing because my friend, he has 5 sisters, and he's one brother of 5 sisters, and he said the one pickup line that is just golden is, I like your earrings. If you say that, you're like, you're in, and you're gonna have at least a 5 minute conversation. I don't know why, but women, you're gonna have a 5 minute conversation. You're in to talk, but I get that. Okay, the last question. We only have 2 more minutes. Okay, so you had said in your book, it's really about appreciation, because everyone needs to be recognized to reach your highest potential. And I believe that, but help me explain a little bit more about what that means. So it's all about appreciating everyone, your coworkers, your boss, right? Because bosses aren't often
bosses
appreciated.
need it big time,
Yeah, or
because
people, your barista, like anyone, but how is that helping someone reach your highest potential?
well, if you think about life is largely tough. I mean, it takes energy to live, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, you have to get up when you're still tired, or you got to do stuff. And so it wears us down, right? I
Hmm.
mean, just going through daily life. And so we sort of lose energy, and that's when we get sort of discouraged and bogged down. And so it's helpful to be re-energized
Mm-hmm.
by somebody that they see the value of what we're doing or who we are, and it affirms that, and that creates some internal energy for us as well. I mean, that's so it's that we live life, sort of collaboratively and cooperatively. I mean, most of us have to live with somebody else,
Right.
whether it's work or family or whatever. And so it's a collaborative effort. It's not that we're just out on our own. And
Right.
we each go through times that are tough. I had twin sons, and the first 2 years were hell. I mean,
Right.
sleep deprivation to the max.
Right.
And I investigated child abuse right after that. And I mean, seriously,
Right.
I
Yeah.
did.
Oh, wow.
And it just wears you out, And there's times when you're not at your best, but people can still support and encourage you
Uh,
through that.
right. It's the
So,
energy that you need. It's funny because my son was in an internship, and I knew that from talking to his boss because they ran into some event. She really appreciated him, and I said, Jed, why don't you ask for feedback from this woman? And because he's like, I'm feeling really exhausted. I just can't do this work anymore. Why
sure.
did I take this job? They're not paying me. Blah blah blah. Long list of
Right.
complaints, right? And I said, why don't you just ask her for feedback? Because maybe you're doing, maybe that would help to get a sense of how. And the boss was like, you're doing great. I love the work that you're doing. You're outperforming most college students that I've had as interns. And that just,
Wow.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
it lit him up. It took someone who is a little bit depressed, exhausted, resentful, and just so I
Yeah.
think and I think it help him reach his highest potential. I think it did give him energy, and
It's
that
good to
energy
on
helped
there.
him like go,
Yeah.
okay, I know what I'm good at. And I think it helps them reach your highest potential if you know what you're good at and what people value. Then I think you're reaching your potential. That's how I would
Sure.
think of it, but who
Yeah.
knows?
And let me just say this before we end, because I know we
Yeah.
need to. We've got lots of videos and free articles and stuff on our website, which is appreciationatwork.com. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
word at, not the at sign. So
Okay.
appreciationatwork.com. Also got stuff about toxic workplaces and vibrant workplaces. And if people want to write me, if they just do admin and appreciation at work and say they're heard, I'll send a couple articles out that I think might be helpful as
Perfect.
well.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So we've been talking to Dr. Paul White about his book that he co-authored with Gary Chapman, The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, CJ.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.